shockwaves are ripping through the church world as one of its brightest rising stars has just been removed from power. Pastor Joel Tudman, a dynamic preacher and familiar face within Bishop T.D. Jakes' Potter's House family, has suddenly been stripped of his position, and the news is leaving thousands of believers stunned. No one saw this coming, and the questions surrounding his removal are growing louder by the hour. For years, Tudman was seen as a voice of the next generation, charismatic, influential, and handpicked to stand under the covering of one of the most powerful ministries in America. But now, his abrupt departure is sparking whispers of controversy, hidden conflicts, and a storm that could have lasting effects on one of the biggest platforms in modern ministry. Was this simply a quiet leadership change, or is there a deeper story the church doesn't want you to know? But here's where it gets explosive. The official story being told doesn't line up with what insiders are whispering behind closed doors. Was Joel Tudman really removed over simple leadership differences? Or is there a deeper controversy the church doesn't want the public to uncover? Stay locked in, because in the next few minutes we're breaking down the shocking details of why Tudman was really fired. And trust me, the truth behind this decision will leave you absolutely stunned. Joel Tudman wasn't just another preacher filling a pulpit. He was a rising star at the Potter's House, often described as Bishop T.D. Jakes' very own protege. With his fiery sermons, motivational edge, and powerful connection to younger believers, many thought he was being groomed for a much bigger role in the ministry's future. But now, with his sudden removal, that dream has been shattered, and the real reasons are starting to surface. As a result, both churchgoers and fans were shocked to learn that he had been abruptly fired. This is where things become fascinating, though. There are some inconsistencies in the stated explanation. There are rumors of conflict, leadership disputes, and decisions made in private meetings that have never been made public behind the happy faces and well-crafted announcements. Today, we're going to take a closer look at the actual reasons Joel Tudman was fired, from disputes over leadership to issues of loyalty, from the strain of contemporary megachurch culture to the potential for more serious emotional difficulties. We'll examine Joel Tudman's ascent to prominence and the reasons he was viewed as a future leader throughout the course of the following chapters. The specifics of his abrupt termination, the contradictory accounts and insider rumors that are going around among members and insiders, how this relates to the larger issues surrounding megachurch leadership, and above all, what this might mean for Joel Tudman's future and the Potter's House legacy going forward. This isn't simply another church scandal, so stay with me. It's a tale about influence, power, and what actually occurs when the cameras and lights are switched off. You'll understand why Joel Tudman's dismissal affects more than one pastor at the end of this video. It has to do with the church's own course. You won't believe some of the things we've discovered, I promise. We must first examine Joel Tudman's first rise to prominence in order to see why his dismissal shocked the religious community. Tudman was more than a mere preacher who happened to land a pulpit. His ascent was meticulously constructed upon years of brilliance, hard effort, and unquestionable charisma. Like many pastors, Joel Tudman began his career with a modest platform, serving dutifully in local ministry and developing a reputation for having a deeper connection with people. He didn't preach in a conventional way. People stopped scrolling and paid attention because it was passionate, relatable, and full of energy. Tudman had the unique ability to combine biblical truth with contemporary storytelling during a time when many churches were having difficulty reaching younger generations. Without diluting the message, he was able to discuss scripture in a way that felt applicable to relationships, identity, finances, and daily difficulties. Bigger churches quickly noticed his talent, and he finally found his way to the Potter's House in Dallas, Texas, one of the most significant venues in the country. Being affiliated with Bishop T.D. Jakes is like getting drafted into the major leagues for anyone familiar with the church world. There is more to the Potter's House than merely a chapel. It is a media empire, a worldwide brand, and a breeding ground for future leaders. This was the major break for Tudman. He started making appearances on platforms at the Potter's House week after week, giving sermons that had people talking long after the event was over. He gained more followers on social media. Videos of his sermons were circulated on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, reaching people well beyond the church's boundaries. Many started speculating that Tudman would be the next well-known figure to pass on the tradition of contemporary preaching to a new generation. This is where the expectations were truly elevated. Tudman was more than just a pastor. He was a mentor, a leader, and a living example of being honest with others. Tudman frequently talked candidly about difficulties, faith conflicts, and the need to live truthfully. In contrast to some pastors who maintain a polished facade, younger believers who were fed up with shallow sermons and church politics found him even more accessible as a result. It felt virtually impossible to stop his ascension inside the Potter's House society. He was seen as one of Bishop Jake's closest followers, and as someone who might continue the tradition in the future. For a while, it appeared like nothing could stop him as the momentum grew. This is where the plot changes though, because fractures started to develop beneath the surface just when everything seemed to be working in his favor. And those fissures would soon grow into something far more significant, which would finally result in his startling expulsion from the very platform that made him famous. So, what specifically went wrong is the question, and why would someone with so much potential be abruptly disconnected? The answer, however, is found in a sequence of events that took place in the background in silence, with the audience only witnessing the highlight reels. The specific events that led to Tudman's termination will be examined in the next part, along with the reasons why the official explanation might not be accurate. The initial reaction upon learning that Joel Tudman had left the Potter's House was one of utter shock. For a lot of people, it was unexpected. This man had, after all, been hailed, exalted, and positioned as one of the brightest stars in contemporary ministry. Why would he abruptly lose the support of a church as big and powerful as the Potter's House? At first, the official story was ambiguous. Actually, if you go back, you'll see that the leadership didn't make a big announcement or give a lengthy explanation. Only rumors were stoked by that silence. Was it a personality conflict, a transgression, or something more profound? Church politics at its best. You have to take a step back and consider how ministries like Potter's House function in order to really comprehend what transpired. Every aspect of a church of that size, with thousands of members, millions of internet viewers, and worldwide influence, is scrutinized. Not every leader who stands on stage is a clergyman. They also serve as a symbol of the heritage, prestige, and brand that Bishop T.D. Jakes has painstakingly developed over the years. Without debate, that kind of pressure can be too much for some people to take. According to people familiar with the matter, Joel Tudman's termination was not the consequence of a single error. Rather, a confluence of internal and external elements produced a storm that was too strong to ignore. Conflicts over vision were alluded to by certain insiders. Was Tudman attempting to define himself in ways that weren't entirely consistent with what the leadership wanted him to be? Others murmured about tense interpersonal interactions that developed behind the scenes as arguments and personality conflicts intensified. The organizational and financial aspects of megachurch life provide an additional dimension. At Tudman's level, leaders are required to do more than just preach. They are supposed to oversee teams, direct activities, and occasionally even secure financing or draw crowds that advance the ministry as a whole. Tension at the top may soon arise if those obligations aren't being fulfilled, or if they lead to disputes about priorities. However, the decision's haste and silence are what caused the most astonishment. There is usually a transitional period, a farewell ceremony, a public blessing, or at the very least a statement of explanation when a pastor or other leader resigns from a significant position. It seems sudden to Tudman. He was there one day and disappeared the next, leaving the congregation and the general public with little explanation. People were left to fill in the blanks on their own because of that information gap. Some conjectured that the church's desired image might have conflicted with personal problems. Some thought it was a part of a bigger change taking place in the Potter's home, a change in leadership as the church got ready for the next phase. Nevertheless, one thing is definite in spite of all the conjecture. Joel Tudman's exit was more than a simple shift of staff. For him personally, as well as the community that had grown to appreciate his voice, it was a sea change. There was more to the narrative than anyone was willing to tell plainly, judging by the way it was handled subtly and with little explanation. This is where the situation becomes even more intriguing, because a number of accounts from those with first-hand knowledge of the situation started to emerge, even while the official narrative was still strictly controlled. Tales that depicted a battle for direction, authority, and identity within one of the biggest churches in America, not just a dismissal. But let's take a moment to think about this before we delve into those accounts. Does a pastor's rapid ascent, widespread attention, and public prominence within a big ministry inevitably lead to conflict between the institution's authority and the individual's calling? Could Tudman's stunning tumble have been caused by that same tension? This is where the narrative takes a dramatic turn, because behind the scenes, murmurs began to become louder while the public was left in silence. Not only did rumors start to spread, but they were also spread by people who had either worked closely with Joel Tudman or had connections to the Potter's House leadership team. Let's begin by discussing one of the most frequently discussed topics: leadership style. Tudman's fierce, impassioned sermons were well known. On stage, he was more than just another voice. He exuded a certain vitality and audacity that made him stand out. However, other people believe that this same individuality has turned into a double-edged sword. According to insiders, Tudman's style occasionally ran counter to the leadership structure's expectations. The Potter's House thrives on harmony, alignment, and a common goal, even as it cherishes strong oratory. A rising star may occasionally cause friction if it starts to shine too brightly. Some even conjectured that tensions arose as a result of Joel Tudman's increasing popularity. Consider it. It can cause a stir when a congregation begins to discuss the assistant pastor more than the senior leadership. Did Tudman have the potential to gain too much power inside the church? Some people think so. Furthermore, influence is money in the realm of megachurches. It dictates not only who is heard, but also the direction the ministry may take in the future. And then there's the strain of expectations within. Preaching was not Tudman's only responsibility. He also had a significant role in program development, leadership, and forming some aspects of the church's outreach. According to some sources, there were disputes on how some ministries should be operated behind closed doors. Was Tudman's vision not entirely in line with the wishes of the senior leadership? Was he advocating for innovation in fields where others favored tradition? According to reports, those creative difficulties may have started off tiny but eventually blossomed into something larger, not to mention the personal cost. Sermons are only one aspect of ministry at that level. It has to do with inspection. Every choice, every action, and every relationship is scrutinized. Rumor had it that Tudman was under a great deal of stress as he attempted to strike a balance between his personal life and the demands of expectations. Some said he was secretly battling burnout behind the confidence of the pulpit. Indeed, several sources suggested that his openness about his difficulties didn't always align with the church's desired public image. This is where the situation becomes even more fascinating. According to several close observers, power dynamics were involved. Succession planning and leadership changes are inevitable at companies the size of the Potter's House. Was Tudman's ascent perceived as a challenge to those currently vying for leadership positions? Or was he being set up for a more significant role? According to a number of pastors who have researched megachurch dynamics, internal disagreements of this kind are not unusual. Sometimes ambition, vision, and influence clash, and someone has to move away as a result. However, the rumor about control versus independence is maybe the most contentious of them. According to numerous reports, Tudman was more than just a preacher who obeyed commands. He had thoughts. He could speak. And because of his social media presence and his personal brand as a motivating leader, he had a following that went well beyond the boundaries of the church. Did they think that independence was a drawback? Did it provide the idea that he was growing larger than the part assigned to him? In actuality, we may never be able to fully understand everything, but it is indisputable that Tudman's departure was caused by more than one incident or problem. It was a storm's effect, a combination of power disputes, personality conflicts, and the unseen burden of expectations that come with working in one of the most significant churches in America. The worst part is still to come. The Potter's House was silent, which only amplified the story's impact. Because speculation arises when leaders refuse to provide clarification, it makes room for these murmurs to develop into theories, which in turn can develop into stories. Furthermore, stories travel more quickly than the facts in the era of social media. What should we do in light of these rumors? Do we write them off as idle rhetoric, or do we see them as parts of a much bigger picture of what it's actually like to be a megachurch leader? The world typically anticipates fireworks, a tearful parting speech, a candid social media post, or perhaps a news conference when a well-known pastor is fired from a prominent pulpit. It lays everything out. When Joel Tudman was fired, however, things took a different turn, remarkably distinct. Rather of hurriedly defending himself or sending out cryptic messages to his detractors, Tudman took a more measured, quieter approach. He didn't post a furious video. He refrained from expressing his frustrations live on Instagram. A heated open letter was not what he wrote. In reality, he did something that many people didn't anticipate in the days and weeks immediately following the firing. His silence said more than words could. You see, stillness is not the norm in the age of quick reactions that we live in today. The exception is this: curiosity and even mistrust are aroused when a prominent figure like Joel Tudman stays silent. Was it a non-disclosure agreement keeping him quiet? Was he secretly defending connections and reputations? Or was it just his way of being polite and not adding gasoline to a fire that was already burning? According to several insiders, Tudman's quiet was a strategic move rather than a sign of weakness. He might have been carefully considering his next course of action rather than letting emotions control him. A preacher of his skill, clout, and fan base doesn't simply vanish overnight. After all, maybe Tudman knew his tale was far from over. What he would do next would only be more anticipated as a result of that stillness. Nevertheless, his absence created a void in the public discourse, and conjecture flourished in that void. After encouraging him in his comment sections, churchgoers started to ask questions. Pastor Tudman is where? What happened? And why hasn't he addressed it? Others attempted to decipher his infrequent posts, looking for subliminal implications in the text he chose, the words he included, or even the pictures he shared. For those who were keen to know what actually happened behind closed doors, every word and every silence became a piece of the puzzle. But there's more to this than just conjecture. The psychological effects of losing a calling in addition to a career. Ministry is more than just a job for pastors. It is its identity, its objective. It is the essence of their identity. And when that is abruptly removed, the stillness might be therapeutic as well as strategic. In previous lectures, Tudman himself has spoken candidly about going through difficult times, learning to cope with loss, and relying on faith when life takes an abrupt and unexpected turn. His silence following the firing was, in many respects, in keeping with the man he had always been, someone who seeks solutions within himself, turning to God rather than the public with every wound. However, the lack of a clear statement brought up significant issues. Was it betrayal for Tudman? Was it a covert deal with leadership that caused him to leave quietly? Was he eschewing drama for dignity? Or was he shielding himself from something more significant that the general public isn't yet aware of? This is something to consider. Being silent is not meaningless. Occurred. In actuality, silence frequently indicates that everything took place. It indicates that the feelings are excessively intense. The narrative is too large, or the wounds are too recent to fit into a single Instagram caption. Additionally, Joel Tudman's quiet has made many take stock and consider the possibility that this was more than simply one man getting fired. Perhaps it was about the overall megachurch leadership culture, how disputes are resolved, and the costs leaders incur when their path doesn't turn out as planned. However, as the weeks stretched into months, one thing became more and more obvious: silence is not permanent. Ultimately, each pastor must choose whether to return to the pulpit, start over, or fade into the background. Joel Tudman also hinted subtly that he had no intention of going missing. Scripture about resiliency, healing, and divine timing was interspersed throughout his sparse social media messages. It seemed as though he was reminding himself and his supporters that there was still more to his narrative. This leads us to one of the most intriguing aspects of the whole story. What can we expect from Joel Tudman's next chapter? Because just as many people were wondering why he was fired, just as many were curious about his future plans.